There's a rack of shoes drying in the sun outside of Embajadores de Jesus shelter in Tijuana. The tongues of the shoes are just hanging out because Customs and Border Protection took the laces from them, even from the tiniest of shoes, including those belonging to Claudia Vázquez del Cid and her 6-year-old daughter, Kami. They fled rampant crime, domestic abuse, and joblessness in a hurricane-wrecked Honduras. They crossed the Rio Grande in Texas earlier this month. She and other women at the shelter didn't want their faces shown on camera.
No nos botaron toda la ropa.
She tells me Customs and Border Protection threw away her clothes, their shoelaces, their money. Now she has nothing to feed her daughter. Vázquez del Cid is one of over 3,000 asylum seekers flown from the Texas border to the San Diego-Tijuana border. That's because Mexican states near the Texas border are not accepting returns of Central American migrant families with young children. But Baja California does. On Friday last week, around 100 people were flown from Texas to San Diego International Airport. They're loaded onto buses right on the tarmac and driven to the border, where they're handed over to Mexican authorities, and driven to the Embajadores de Jesus shelter, where they're greeted by Pastor Gustavo Banda Aceves, who has operated the shelter for 6 years. Each day over the past month, 100 migrants have arrived at the shelter. The children are mostly between the ages of 2 and 8.
Llegan muy mal. Algunos de ellos se desmayan en la silla.
They arrive in very bad shape, Pastor Gustavo tells me. Some of them faint in their seats on the way to the shelter. All of them come with coughs, with vomiting, with stomach illnesses. After crossing the border, the families are held in dangerously crowded and freezing holding cells called hileras, where COVID-19 and other illnesses spread quickly. 28-year-old Gladys Garcia was held in one with her young daughter, Maria, for 3 days. There, her daughter became ill. She said she struggled to breathe.
La niña igual se me puso bien mal del pecho.
She said Border Patrol told her they didn't have any medications, to drink water instead. She asked for clothes for her daughter after they took their belongings, but they said they didn't have any. Garcia and her daughter are from Honduras, like many others at the shelter. They left Chamelacon, which she described as ground zero for the 2 hurricanes that devastated the region last fall. She told me she was living in the street, in the mud. With gangs taking over what was left of the neighborhood, she decided to try to get to the United States, where she already had family in Houston. She thought she was close to reuniting with them, but she was wrong. She says the Border Patrol agents laughed at them when they asked if they were going to be deported. No, they told her. She was going to a shelter in San Diego, where she would soon be released to her family. Later that day, she was in Mexico. Before January 2019, families were allowed into the U.S. to pursue their asylum claims. Since then, however, a combination of restrictive policies under the Biden and Trump administrations have kept them mostly out, even as conditions worsen in Central America. With the Biden administration no longer removing unaccompanied children, many parents at the border are deciding to send their children ahead, alone, in the hands of smugglers. Pastor Gustavo said this decision has contributed to the record-breaking rise in the amount of unaccompanied children crossing the border.
Yo no entendía.
He says it's difficult to understand, but to make sure their kids don't die from gang violence, they have to decide to send them ahead, alone, even if it might mean they never see their children again. Either way, they won't see them again, but in America, they'll be safe. One morning last week, some families lined up for a bus to take them back to Central America. Others head back to Reynosa to cross the border again in Texas, in the hopes they'll be let into the country. Claudia Vázquez del Cid, holding the hand of her young daughter, doesn't know what she'll do. She just says she can't go back to Honduras.
No sé, porque no quiero regresar a mi país. No quiero regresar.
In Tijuana, Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.